Deep in the Yucatan Peninsula, beneath a black, flooded cavern called Hoyo Negro, a silent witness sleeps. Her name is Naya, a teenage girl who fell into this abyss over 12,000 years ago in the Ice Age world of mammoths and saber-toothed cats. Her skull is long and narrow, with features unlike any modern Maya or Native American. By sight alone, she appears to belong to a vanished people, a face lost to time. But when scientists carefully extracted mitochondrial DNA from her tooth, the results were staggering. Naya carried haplogroup D1, a maternal lineage that flows directly into the blood of the modern Maya and countless other Native Americans. In that instant, the contradiction was clear. A face that looked nothing like her descendants carried a genetic signature unchanged for more than 12 millennia. This discovery shattered long-held assumptions about the first Americans. For decades, archaeologists argued that the earliest skulls in the Americas looked different, suggesting separate migrations or even lost populations. But Naya's DNA told a different story: continuity, not replacement. The first humans who crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia, braving the frozen world at the end of the Ice Age, were the ancestors of the Maya. Through every drought, war and collapse, their lineage survived, unbroken to the present day. Imagine her world for a moment. A young girl walking through endless wilderness, unaware that her descendants will build pyramids in the jungles, chart the stars, and carve their history in stone. She could never know that her bones would one day speak for her, that her DNA would bridge the gap between vanished Paleo-American faces and the living Maya people. This unbroken chain of inheritance is more than science. It is resilience made visible in the smallest molecules of life. Despite conquest, epidemics, and centuries of isolation, the Maya carry the whisper of Naya's genome in their cells. It is a lineage that has refused to die, a bloodline that connects modern villagers in the Guatemalan highlands to the very first footsteps in the Americas. But how could a single genetic thread survive everything history threw at it, when so many civilizations disappeared without a trace? To uncover that mystery, we must dive even deeper into the hidden code of Maya DNA, and follow it through time, catastrophe and survival. The story begins around 18,000 years ago, when the last ice age gripped the planet. A frozen corridor called the Bering Land Bridge, Beringia, connected Siberia to Alaska, and small bands of hunters crossed into a new world. Genetic evidence shows these pioneers carried with them only a handful of mitochondrial lineages, the seeds of every Native American genome. Among these lineages were haplogroups A2, B2, C1, and D1, the very ones that define the Maya today. As the first Americans moved south, some stayed in the Arctic. Others spread into the Great Plains, the deserts, the Andes. And a small branch travelled all the way to the tropical heart of Mesoamerica. Here, in the jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula and the Guatemalan highlands, these genetic travellers became the ancestors of the Maya. Modern studies reveal an astonishing picture. Haplogroup A2 dominates among Yucatan Maya, strong in northern communities where early agricultural centres rose. B2, more frequent in the highlands, shows how geography sculpted genetic patterns over millennia. C1 and D1, rarer yet critical, appear in ancient remains from sites like Copan and even in the Ice Age skeleton of Naya in Hoyo Negro Cave. Together they form a genetic fingerprint that has endured for over 12,000 years. Equally important is what the Maya lack. Unlike many North American tribes, they carry almost no haplogroup X, a lineage that hints at a slightly different branch of the first migration. This near absence confirms that the Maya are a distinct southern lineage, largely isolated from northern gene flow after they reached Mesoamerica. The proof lies in groundbreaking research. In 2018, a team analysing 71 ancient Maya skeletons compared their DNA to modern villagers. The results were undeniable: genetic continuity across 12,000 years, through the rise of Tikal, the collapse of Copan, and even the devastation of Spanish conquest. The same maternal lineages carried by Ice Age hunters are alive today, in the blood of children playing in highland villages. But within this continuity, scientists began to see something unexpected: fragments of DNA that didn't belong. Signals that somewhere in Maya history, foreign blood entered the story. If the Maya are direct descendants of the first Americans, why do parts of their genome feel like strangers from far away? The answer begins with the fathers, because hidden in the Y chromosomes of Maya men is a pattern so extreme, so singular, it feels almost impossible. Over 95% of all Maya men carry one Y chromosome lineage, haplogroup Q, specifically its subbranches Q1A2, A1A1-M3 and Q1A2-1-L 54. Think about that. Across more than 3,000 years of city-states, across wars, trade and the Spanish conquest, the paternal line of the Maya barely changed. Geneticists call this a homogeneity, almost unseen in world populations. While most regions of the globe hold a tapestry of different Y chromosomes, the Maya are like a single thread stretching through time. From the earliest hunters who crossed the Bering Land Bridge, to the builders of Tikal, Palenque and Copan, to farmers in modern highland villages, the same paternal signal remains. It is as if one original group of fathers seeded an entire civilization and their bloodline never broke. Ancient DNA studies reveal why. The Maya world was a network of cities, kingdoms and trade routes, but genetically they were deeply connected. Even as each city had its own king, its own gods, Y chromosome STR networks show shared paternal haplotypes across regions hundreds of miles apart. A ruler in Copan and a farmer in Yucatan could share a paternal ancestor from thousands of years before. Male lineages flowed through alliances, intermarriages, and the movement of commoners, weaving a single genetic fabric. And still the question lingers: how did this survive conquest and collapse? History tells us the Spanish left their mark across the Americas, often through the male line. Yet in many traditional Maya communities, European Y chromosomes are almost absent. The core paternal line endured, while the invaders left barely a whisper in the blood of the men who remained. It is a story of identity, isolation and survival, written in the smallest code of life. But even this perfect unity has cracks. In the ruins of a single ancient tomb, scientists found a Y chromosome that did not belong. A foreign lineage, a silent witness to a forgotten event. And it forces one haunting question: who was this outsider and why was he buried as Maya? The answer waited, sealed in the limestone tombs of Copan, one of the most powerful cities of the classic Maya world. For centuries, its temples and stelae spoke of kings, wars, and cosmic rituals. But beneath the carved stone, in the stillness of its royal graves, lay a secret that the bones themselves refused to hide. When scientists finally sequenced the ancient DNA of Copan's rulers, they expected the familiar signature of the Maya, haplogroup Q, maternal lines A2 and B2. Instead, they found a startling twist. Among the local genomes was a pulse of foreign ancestry, DNA strands that traced not to Guatemala or the Yucatan, but to the highlands of central Mexico, hundreds of miles away. The revelation was impossible to ignore. Around the 5th to 8th centuries CE, Copan had been a glittering hub of power, drawing artists, merchants and warriors from across Mesoamerica. The evidence now suggested something more intimate, foreigners living, ruling, and perhaps even marrying into the royal lines of the Maya. One ruler's Y chromosome carried the mark of an outsider father, while his autosomal DNA blended local and highland Mexican ancestry. Archaeology had left clues all along. Ceramics in Copan bore the unmistakable style of Teotihuacan, the great city of central Mexico. Warrior imagery, obsidian trade routes, and even temple murals hinted at deep connections between the two civilizations. The DNA simply confirmed what the stones had been whispering. Copan was not a closed world. It was a crossroads where bloodlines, not just goods, exchanged hands. Imagine the story behind that single strand of foreign DNA. Perhaps a marriage alliance, a royal hostage turned king, or a warrior who rose to power in a city far from his birthplace. Whatever the truth, his presence rewrites the idea of Maya isolation. Their cities were alive with movement, with secrets, with silent mingling of distant worlds. But this revelation carries a darker undertone, because just as the Maya began to absorb outsiders into their lineage, their civilization was heading toward catastrophe. The cities that had once thrived on connection would soon crumble, leaving only scattered survivors and fragments of a genetic legacy clinging to life in the jungles. Then, suddenly, the jungle reclaimed everything. Around the 9th century CE, the great cities of the Maya began to die. Tikal, Copan, Palenque, once alive with music, firelight, and the footsteps of thousands, fell silent. Palaces crumbled under vines, market plazas filled with the sound of rain instead of trade. No single invader ended this world. It was something deeper, a chain of disasters that left a scar in both history and blood. Archaeology paints the scene with haunting clarity. Carved stele shokings still performing rituals even as their people starved. Pollen records tell of long droughts when the skies withheld rain for years, and layers of charcoal reveal cities at war, neighbours turning on neighbours as crops failed. But DNA, the silent witness, tells the most intimate story of the collapse. In the remains of Copan's final generations, scientists discovered a population bottleneck so severe it was written in the genome. Where once many lineages thrived, suddenly only a handful remained. It is as if entire family trees were erased in a single generation, their genetic branches severed by hunger, conflict, and abandonment. Y chromosome diversity shrank. Mitochondrial lineages vanished. The survivors who fled into the forests carried only fragments of what had once been a thriving genetic tapestry. Imagine walking through an abandoned plaza in 875 CE, the jungle just beginning to creep in. Every statue, every carving was made for ancestors who would never see their descendants inherit the city. Their DNA, their memory, was moving somewhere else, into hidden villages and mountain refuges as the heart of the Maya world crumbled. This was not just a cultural collapse, it was a genetic collapse, a wound so deep that scientists can measure it in modern Maya blood today. Entire paternal lines ended, maternal branches faded, only the strongest threads, by chance or by choice, wove themselves into the future. And yet, this was not the end. Because in the stillness of the abandoned cities in the silent forests, a whisper endured. Even as their cities fell silent, their genes whispered a story of survival. That whisper leads us deep into the tropical rainforests of Chiapas, where the last guardians of ancient bloodlines still lived, far from the ruins of the fallen cities. Here, in the shadows of ceiba trees and under the constant hum of the jungle, survived the Lacandon Maya, isolated communities that became invisible to history for centuries. When scientists first sequenced their DNA, the results were almost impossible to believe. Nearly every maternal lineage in the Inse Lacandon population belongs to mitochondrial haplogroup A2. This single genetic signature is a direct echo of the first Americans, the Ice Age families who crossed the Bering Land Bridge over 15,000 years ago. While the classic Maya cities of Tikal, Palenque and Copan rose and fell, while dynasties fought and vanished, the bloodline of the Lacandon remained unbroken and untouched. It is one of the purest genetic time capsules in the Americas. The rainforest itself acted as a fortress. Rivers, swamps, and thick vegetation created natural barriers that shielded these people from conquest, migration, and even cultural shifts that swept through the rest of Mesoamerica. Archaeological evidence suggests that while neighbouring regions saw trade with Teotihuacan, Toltec influences, and population mixing, the Lacandon lived in small, self-contained groups, rarely exceeding a few hundred individuals. Their isolation preserved not just their genes, but fragments of their ancient language, rituals, and cosmology, passed down in whispers by firelight. In 2018, a study comparing modern Lacandon DNA with pre-Columbian skeletal remains from across the Maya world confirmed a haunting truth. The Lacandon carry nearly identical maternal haplotypes to individuals who lived over 1,200 years ago and ultimately trace back to the original settlers of the Americas. Few human populations on Earth can claim such continuity. But this purity came at a cost. Genetic isolation means fragility. A single epidemic, a single wave of violence, can erase lineages that survived for millennia. And that storm was coming. In the 16th century, sails appeared on the horizon. The Spanish marched inland with steel, fire, and disease, tearing through Mesoamerica like a silent plague. For the hidden villages that had escaped time itself, this was a threat no isolation could withstand. Because when the Spanish arrived, a new storm threatened to erase the Maya forever. It came with sails on the horizon, steel in the sunlight, and diseases carried on the breath of strangers. In 1524, the Spanish pushed into the Guatemalan highlands and the jungles of the Yucatan, bringing conquest and catastrophe. For the Maya, it was a silent apocalypse. Within a single generation, up to 90% of the population was gone. Smallpox, measles, and influenza did what no army could. They swept through villages like fire, leaving behind only empty homes and mass graves. From a genetic perspective, it was a bottleneck unlike anything in their history. Entire lineages, paternal and maternal, vanished in a single wave of death. Where once the Maya genome had been a vibrant mosaic of ancient branches, now only a handful of surviving lines carried the weight of 1,000 years of memory. It is written in the DNA itself, a scar you can still trace in the blood of their descendants today. And yet something extraordinary happened, even under the crushing weight of conquest. European and African DNA barely entered the core Maya villages. Unlike in many other parts of the Americas, where colonial men left their mark in the Y chromosome and reshaped native bloodlines, the heart of the Maya genome remained stubbornly, defiantly their own. It is as if, in the face of fire and famine, their DNA itself became an act of resistance. Visualize the map of Mesoamerica. Red dots for thriving cities suddenly winking out one by one. Overlays of colonial maps, Spanish forts, and roads slicing into jungle territory. And then a soft dissolve into the faces of modern Maya children, carrying the same mitochondrial sequences as the first Americans, the same Y chromosome threads that endured collapse after collapse. This survival was not just physical, it was genetic memory, preserved through centuries of isolation and quiet resilience. Even when their cities fell, even when their numbers were reduced to a fraction, the essence of who they were endured in their blood. And then, centuries later, as scientists began to decode this legacy, they discovered that the Maya genome still carried secrets the world had never seen before. Those secrets reveal a world hidden in plain sight, a genetic mosaic unlike any other on Earth. At first glance, the Maya seem like one people, united by history and tradition. But inside their DNA, every village tells its own story. The people of Tojolabal, K'iche', Kekchi, and Yucatec Maya each carry subtle genetic variations, as if their ancestors left individual signatures in the code of life. Scientists call it the result of endogamy, isolation, and drift. Centuries of living in small, tightly bound villages meant that certain lineages became dominant in one valley, rare in another, and vanished entirely just a few miles away. Over time, these micro-isolates turned the Maya world into a constellation of unique genetic identities, all orbiting the same ancient core. From the air, you see forests, mountains, and rivers. From the genome, you see tiny glowing islands of ancestry, each carrying a slightly different flavour of the same 12,000-year-old story. This is why modern Maya DNA looks like a living archive. A child born in a Lacandon village may carry the same maternal lineage as Naya, the Ice Age girl from Hoyo Negro. But a Tojolabal farmer in Chiapas, or a Quechua villager in the Guatemalan highlands, may carry a variant shaped by local isolation, a unique branch of an ancient tree. Together they form a mosaic, internally diverse, yet globally unique, with no perfect mirror anywhere else in the Americas. Visualize it as a map of light. Each dot is a village. Lines connect families across generations. Patterns emerge like constellations in the night sky, revealing how the Maya carried their ancestral code across time, not in great migrations but in quiet continuity. A code that survived empires, collapse and conquest, only to splinter into 1,000 local reflections of the same origin. But this mosaic is not frozen in the past. It lives, it breathes, and it interacts with the modern world in ways scientists are only beginning to understand. Because the same unique genetics that preserved their identity would also shape how the Maya body responds to the challenges of today. And it is here that the next secret emerges. This uniqueness isn't just a relic. It's alive in ways we can see and measure today. Because inside the Maya genome, there are memories written in code. Memories of hunger, survival, and the desperate struggle to live in a world that could turn against them without warning. For thousands of years, the Maya thrived in a land of extremes. Seasons of plenty could be followed by droughts that lasted years, like the ones that helped bring their great cities to ruin. In those times, the people who survived were the ones whose bodies learned to cling to every calorie, every drop of energy, passing that survival trait to their children. Modern science calls it the thrifty gene effect, a biological inheritance where the body is perfectly tuned for scarcity, but suffers in abundance. Genetic studies reveal that many Maya communities today carry adaptations in insulin regulation and fat storage, traits that were once the difference between life and death during famine. In the ancient world, these genes were heroes. In the modern world, surrounded by processed foods and sugar, they have become a silent danger. The results are heartbreaking. Across the Yucatan and Guatemalan highlands, type 2 diabetes and obesity rates are some of the highest in the Americas. Communities that once endured droughts and collapse now face a new invisible enemy, one born from their own genetic memory of survival. It is as if the past is still alive in their blood, turning a gift of resilience into a modern curse. Picture the contrast. On one side of the screen, a traditional Maya farmer bent over a field of maize, living as his ancestors did for thousands of years. On the other, a crowded city street, fast food stalls glowing under neon lights, where those same ancestral genes fight to adapt to a world they were never built for. Yet within this challenge lies hope. By unlocking the secrets of these ancient adaptations, scientists believe they can predict health risks, guide diets, and protect future generations. The very code that remembers famine could become the key to fighting modern disease. Because deep inside every Maya cell, the past is still whispering. And through science, these ancient codes may guide not just the past, but the future of Maya survival. Because hidden within that survival lies something even more profound, an unbroken chain stretching back nearly 13,000 years. From the frozen world of the Ice Age to the bustling streets of modern Guatemala, a single thread of life has endured. It begins with Naya, the teenage girl who fell into the Hoyo Negro cave. Her skull belonged to a world long vanished, but her DNA, it is still alive. Today, in the laughter of a Maya child running through a highland village, that same maternal sequence, haplogroup D1, is quietly pulsing in every cell. One strand, one microscopic signature, passed from mother to child for hundreds of generations. Through drought and famine, through the fall of Tikal and the ashes of Copan, through the fire and steel of the Spanish conquest, that code never broke. It is the longest surviving inheritance of the Americas, and it has outlived kingdoms, gods, and empires. Geneticists can trace this continuity like a river of light flowing through time. Mitochondrial DNA shows the mothers who carried the first fire into the Yucatan. Y chromosome patterns show the fathers who built pyramids, hunted in the forests, and watched their cities rise and fall. Together, they form a living chain of identity, proof that the Maya are not a story lost in stone, but a people who carry their history in their blood. Imagine that chain as a timeline. Naya in 11,000 BCE, the kings of classic Maya cities in 700 CE, the hidden villages of the Lacandon forest in 1600 CE, and finally a modern child standing in the same sun, carrying the same spark of life. 13,000 years, unbroken. This is the immortal lineage, not a myth, not a memory, but a living truth written in DNA. It raises a question that lingers long after the last ruin falls silent. If a single strand of DNA can carry a civilization across time, what hidden lineages are waiting to be discovered in us? And if you're fascinated by lost histories and the mysteries hidden in ancient DNA, subscribe for more untold stories and step deeper into the past that still lives within us.